Tommy Gregors,
Yes, sir.
glad you could be with us.
Glad to be here.
All right. So we've been waiting on Mr. Belusco.
Downtown's closed.
So why is maybe that's where we start, since we haven't even talked about that. We've actually had a full podcast before we started today, and we've been drinking some excellent Pretoria Fields beer. What's your favorite beer?
It has to be the Skywater.
Yeah.
For a couple of reasons. I like the flavor, and with the work I do at the River Aquarium, it fits right in.
Fits right in. So Skywater Creek is here in Albany.
Mm-hmm. Down near Radium Springs, the old Radium Springs, where the old Radium Springs Casino was, another one of our historic sites here in town. And actually, Radium Springs is one of Georgia's 7 natural wonders.
Yeah. So when we were looking around at names, and that was the reason we chose that, was Skywater and the Radium Springs area. When I think I graduated from high school, my dad and a couple other men had a party for me and several other the guys who were graduating at the old casino there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been, and at that time, Mr. Dan, I don't remember, I'm blanking on his last name. He owned it. And I think he's the one that actually ended up donating it to the state.
Yeah, and like many things, I mean, we have always sort of thrived on our water here. Water's been an important part of our development and just what we have to offer here. And Radium was one of those sites that was just very important to our history and how we developed as a city.
Geologically, it's classified as a blue hole. Is that correct?
Yes. Just an opening in our limestone aquifer here. And one of the areas when I've gone to other places and start talking about blue holes, one of the questions I get, well, what's a blue hole? They don't really understand what that concept is. And we're very fortunate to have many of them up along the Flint River and the Kitchafoonie and Muckalee Creeks here.
Well, if you were going to take a blue hole and actually duplicate it, is that possible?
Yeah, we did that at Flint River Aquarium, exactly, over there. And that's part of many people that have been out that haven't had the opportunity to go out and actually swim and grow up and canoe, kayak, fish along the Flint Rivers, maybe have not seen those. And so at Flint River Aquarium, we've recreated that. We've got a 175,000-gallon blue hole right there.
So are you saying we have an open invitation to kayak in your blue hole over at the Flint River Aquarium?
We can probably work something out there, but if you want to do some diving, we can do some scuba diving.
At least do some fishing. Yeah, because I've seen the fishing.
We can do some demonstrations.
Yeah, we can do a demonstration. We can, if you want to come in and help us do some cleanup or feed the fish, we can scuba dive in there.
Can we feed them with fishing flies?
So, maybe not there.
We're catch and release guys.
Yeah, we're all catch and release.
We do some demos closer to the actual river down there, so we have done that.
So we're closed off downtown. Why are we closed off this weekend?
We're getting ready for our 19th Downtown Street Festival, formerly called our Mardi Gras Street Festival here. Originally, Phil Cannon and Bo Henry started this event up as a way to showcase downtown, and we've continued it going, and I came in a few years later as part of Thronatiska Heritage Center. Again, just trying to showcase what we have, bring people downtown, and throughout the years, we've had as many as 50,000 people down here on a Saturday in downtown Albany.
Oh, that's amazing. And what's the economic impact of that?
It's huge. We'll work with the Convention and Visitors Bureau to really come up with those numbers, but they added onto our festival event the Snickers Marathon, and we'll have, I think they're getting close to 1,500 runners that'll be participating in the marathon tomorrow, and getting that set up starting in the morning and going the 26 plus miles all through our community. And this, one of the big attractions to it is the fact that it is a Boston Marathon qualifier. So we have runners from all over the world and the country come in here to qualify on this race because it's flat and it's fast.
Yeah, sea level.
Yep.
Flat.
Mm-hmm.
I actually ran it. But it does, just because it's flat doesn't make it easy. 26 miles
it's still 26 miles.
It's still a really, really, really long way.
Yeah, and it's hot.
So I'm guessing you didn't make it in the 2 hours.
I did not. The qualifying, yeah. I didn't even beat Oprah. Sorry, Oprah, but you beat me.
I'm sure she's watching.
She's actually excited that she beat me. So,
But you did.
I think she's pretty competitive.
That's an accomplishment.
I think so. Yep.
You weren't always a historian. So how did you? You're an Albany boy.
Yep. Born and raised here. My father and grandfather actually had a feed and seed store here in Albany that I grew up working in, a retail business here, and sort of my first jobs. Went and graduated from Riverview Academy in 1976. Mm-hmm. Left there and went to work for Procter & Gamble in the production floor and really worked my way up throughout there over 18 years until I was in charge of the contract construction labor out there.
So you started on a Monday graduated on a Monday and started on a Tuesday?
Yeah. I was out of high school 12 hours before I started work out there. Actually graduated at 8 o'clock on Monday night and went to work at 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning at Procter & Gamble.
That's pretty much how I started graduated from residency on Sunday evening, and I think I started work on Monday morning.
There you go.
So that's not an uncommon thing to do. So Veronica Tiska, the Aquarium, anything else you do?
Just recently, with our group, we started a partnership about 10 years ago with Flint River Aquarium and Thronatiska Heritage Center, just because of our close proximity, and we really targeted some of the same audience, the same school groups, and people came to both places, and we just saw an opportunity to work together and try to get some economies of scale and just help each other out and market our product better on a broader scale. And then just a couple of months ago, we brought Chiho into that partnership and sort of beginning that process of figuring out how we can really benefit our community as a whole. We've now got downtown connected out to Chiho Park, which is a great resource, over 800 acres of zoo, hiking trails, camping areas. It's been a long history at Chiho, and we can pull that in. And with the continued development of the Flint River Trail system, connecting that part of our community to downtown and really bringing folks into downtown and giving them a way back out and to have some other areas that they can enjoy.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about downtown. We've got the Downtown Festival. How is it developed, and why is it important that we have a strong and thriving downtown? I mean, to me, it's obvious, but maybe to everybody, it's not obvious. I mean, why is that a good thing? Why not just have everything out in West or East Albany? Or
well, I think if you go to many of the towns that a lot of us travel to. I mean, if you think about Savannah or Thomasville or Charlotte or other places, they really have focused on their downtown area as their hub, as a place for tourists to come to, and then you can still go out to other sites and other venues from that point. But it is our historic center. It's where the town was founded by Nelson Tift in 1836. The first log cabin was built just a few hundred feet from where we're sitting here now, and it has always been that anchor to our community, and we've gone out from there. But it really hasn't been important, and we're starting to bring people back. Of course, in the 70s, sort of the mall suburban development came about, and everybody started moving away from the downtown.
Sure.
But now there are malls failing all over the country, and people are starting to come back. Yeah, as people are starting to come back to these little boutique, smaller towns that they don't want to go to these large places, and I think the younger generations appreciate that more and want a true, real experience.
Mm-hmm. We talk a lot about the public house, and that's what we've tried to be, is have this idea of, we're not a bar, we occasionally will show a sports event, but if we do, it's an event, like we'll show it on the big screen. But we want people to come in and talk to each other and have a meeting place. And to me, that's what downtowns were sort of about. They were about milling around. They were about people coming in and showing what they had grown or done, and those type things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I say, just again, from my generation, I've been involved in Albany for quite a few years, and go out and every time I do go to the pub and are down there, I see people I don't know and have not seen before. I mean, it's a new crowd of people, which is encouraging to me.
Yes.
That we're bringing new people into this and they can see what we have to offer.
Right, and the bigger we are, and the more this is from the brewery standpoint, the more we expand, and we've expanded Savannah, North Georgia, Atlanta, and Alabama. Now we're getting tourists. I mean, I was going to say something more than that, but tourists coming from Atlanta just because they want to see where our stuff's made.
We're going to say brewery seekers.
Yeah, brewery seekers.
Well, I mean, certainly, and I try to keep up with trends and information because it impacts us at our business, in getting tourists into town. But, there are many people that do the craft brew tours and look for those places and plan their destinations around those. Albany has always been a place, if we can get you here, we get a lot of compliments from our out-of-town people, and just they're amazed of what all we have to offer here. Sometimes, more complimentary than some of our local people sometimes.
Sure, yeah. Well, when you're local, you take it for granted. We lived less than an hour's drive, like 45 minutes drive, when we lived in North Macon from the Braves, and we never went. So you forget, and then suddenly then when we moved to Albany, we went to many more Braves games than we were a lot closer.
Yeah.
Because we were like, oh, let's go.
We do, and we've seen that. I've been here all my life, and having been at 3 of our sort of signature attractions here. I've been everyone where I've talked to people that have lived in Albany all their life, or they've been here 30 years or 40 years, and they've never been to Chiho, never been to the planetarium or the history museum.
Yeah.
And the River Aquarium has been here now almost 15 years, and we still have people that have never been to the aquarium.
I think if you have children, you're going to go to those places. I don't know. My kids were. I think their handprints are still probably up at the River Aquarium, and
Ours are too.
yeah. I mean, and Chiho. I mean, I remember being a young parent when I was a young parent.
Well, what we see on some of those, I've been doing this long enough now that I've seen, kids that came are starting to bring their kids, and the next time I'm going to see some of them is when they bring their grandkids.
Yeah, don't say that because we don't want grandkids just yet.
Some of us are older than others.
So you're a historian, and you learned your trade on the job, sort of like being at Procter & Gamble, which is very similar to your other career.
Yeah, it has been, and part of that, I mean, again, growing up here and having parents, grandparents, great grandparents that had lived here as well, listening to their stories. Mm-hmm. I can recall a lot of the things I heard growing up as a child, just about different homes, different people that lived here, different events that happened in the community. So that's been an important part, and I think preserving our history, telling those stories is important. Sometimes we don't, again, appreciate those, and sometimes our kids don't like to sit down and listen to some of those stories that we tell. But it is important to carry that forward, and so that we do have a community history that is preserved.
So do you have a favorite, we talked about a favorite historical story about Albany. You have at least one ghost story about Albany. I have a similar ghost story about Albany, so share.
Yeah, well, we have had throughout the years some paranormal groups come and check out our different facilities. The Bridge House, where the Convention and Visitors Bureau is one place. At the old Union Station train depot, some of my staff does not like to go into some of the rooms at night alone because they hear noises or hear creaks and sounds and different things go off during the night. But we've had a group that came in and said actually we had several the presence of several folks that were still hanging around the depot there.
Yeah. And is that due to a certain event that might have happened there?
Could be. I've done some research, and again, that depot, the old depot, has been there since 1857, October of 1857, when the first train came to Albany. But later on, we had as many as 40 trains a day coming through the Union Station here in Albany. Many passenger trains going all over the country. We had trains traveling from Chicago to Miami. And one story that I did find that was actually recorded, that there was a young lady in her mid-20s that was traveling by herself from Chicago to Miami. The train stopped in Albany. They got off for lunch. She had met another guy on the train. They were having lunch together and evidently did not hear the all-aboard call from the conductor, and looked up and saw the train pulling out of the station. And they started running after it, trying to get on the train. And when she grabbed for it, she slipped and fell, and the train actually knocked her down the tracks, and she was decapitated right outside
It's a bad day.
the cafeteria. Yes.
But that would lead to a ghost story.
I believe it would.
That would lead
Yes.
to a ghost story.
There's a pretty good chance of that.
So the ghost story that I know is they were fishing on the side of the Flint River, and a headless horse came up, and of course scared them. They ran off, and I don't know as much of the story.
Apparently, that horse got on the tracks too.
Yeah, and it's actually an artifact that a local artist, the She Headless Horse, has been made famous. Quite a large area around the world. So, and it's interesting, a lot of those phenomena. The horse, I looked this up. The horse actually represents the psyche or soul of people, and then the headless horse represents, because you can find headless horsemen all over the world.
Yes.
And so it's a very common phenomena that people see this. But the idea is that you have lost your way.
At Toronto, there were some family members. There was a particular lady that was getting married, and she was marrying somebody that was coming to Albany to help settle Albany. And basically her family just wished her goodbye because they never thought they would see her again. And just it was just because of disease and everything going on there. And that's
And prevalence for decapitation.
And lots of three-eyed shoal bass.
Yeah, lots of three-eyed.
But part of that too, think about too the way of getting water. It really was not until the late 1800s until the first artesian well was drilled anywhere in the state, so that you could actually get clean sanitary water coming up out of the aquifers here.
So that's Flowing Well, or no? Is that the Flowing Well out on Flowing Well Road?
It's out in western Doherty County, out close to 8 Mile Road out there.
Yeah, that would actually be where the Flowing
Yeah,
Well
where they
Road
came
is,
from.
where Flowing Well,
Yeah.
where Pretoria Fields Farm is.
That's
Absolutely.
awesome. That
That's
is
a good-
an incredible segue.
Oh,
Mr. Gregors.
It was. John Porter Fort drilled that first well out there.
That sounds like a good Porter name.
Did you even
Was
know
his
that?
name was John Porter Fort?
It was.
Yes.
John Porter Fort,
John
Imperial.
John
no.
Porter Fort.
Oatmeal port.
Or,
Oatmeal port stout. Port.
We actually have the marble plaque at the museum as well that was on that site.
yeah, we might have to get a picture of that and put it on a beer.
Absolutely.
So over the last, actually it's probably been 20 years, but there's been a lot of concern recently over the stormwater, and we really have a 1800s drainage system that's hooked
1922.
up. We have a 1900s drainage system hooked up to somewhat of a modern drainage system, and we've had a lot of issues with it. That started around the 1960s. Is that?
Yeah. Well, the early once a lot of the clean water initiatives started taking place, the municipalities had to stop dumping sewage straight into the river, and they started building sewage treatment plants. The challenge in downtown with the old buildings and all the paving and sidewalks and everything is here. The downtown sewer system was a combined sewer system that the stormwater and the septic and the other sewer went into the same pipe. Basically, they just intercepted those pipes at the river and sent it then to a sewage treatment plant.
Or to Bainbridge.
Yeah, depending on how high the water is. But it has to get treated, and then before it's released, it has to be treated in there. And The new initiatives by the city, the county, and others has been, as new developments came in, they had a separated storm drain and sewer system to take care of that, and that's why this sort of our water quality is so important as we continue to maintain it. And it's a huge cost to upgrade those systems, but the city has really worked for years and trying to, as new development
Have
comes
they
in.
really worked?
I
Or
believe
have they sort of kicked the can down the road?
Well, I think they have. I mean, it's
I mean,
it's
from a
about the
reason-
money.
Yeah.
I mean,
Need
It's-
funding.
It's very expensive, and
Yeah.
I get that.
Crazy expensive.
But logically, it seems that I mean, there's nobody in today's society that would look at it and say, "Oh, we should be dumping sewage in the river." That's a really good idea.
It made sense
That's
up until like
That's a good idea. Yeah, until
50 something.
until Leeuwenhoek invented the
EPA.
microscope, and we figured out that bacteria lived in your poop.
well, but if you look at some of the, in the 70s, really before the Clean Water Act really came to be, there was, and before really the environmental movement started going ahead, I mean, you had rivers up in the northern U.S. that were catching on fire and burning. I mean, just whether it was industry or sanitary systems going straight into waterways, it just thought it was okay because it would get disseminated and move on. It'd be somebody else's problem. But again, it's a very expensive thing, and it's a burden on the taxpayers.
Sure.
Regardless of whether it's local, state, or federal money, it's still taxpayer money.
Right. And and I don't disregard that we're all going to have to deal with it at some point. It is important, I guess.
Absolutely.
Is the point. So, were there we had the Chiho is obviously an Indian name, and Thronatiska is an Indian name. So what does Thronatiska mean? Or does it have a meaning?
It does. It's been interpreted to be the place where Flint is picked up, thus the Flint River name coming out of that. And all along this area, I mean, this was a very inhabited site by Native Americans up and down. The Chiho village to the north of here was a very large village that existed to the north and south. I mean, you can find Indian artifacts all up and down this area. We had they went where there were resources. They had flint for making their tools with. We had game and food. We had a very temperate climate here, so it made a very good place for folks to live. And if you think about the artifacts that we find, people have been living here for over 10,000 years,
right,
in this area. And if you think about all the tools and pieces that have been picked up along the years and we still continue to find them today. There's been people here for a real long
But
time.
you're not actually allowed to take them home.
unless if they're submerged.
Yeah.
So if they're outside of the water, you can take them. I think is that right?
Yeah,
If you
private,
turn it up on like farmland,
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
turn them on farmland. But
private,
yes.
private land. There's no restrictions as long as you have permission.
but you can't
There's-
go in the Flint.
Yeah,
Take anything
that's a
out.
weird rule, but
It
but it's
it
a
makes
rule.
sense. I don't
I
know.
get it. I don't know.
It's yeah.
it's heritage.
it's a
all
public-
it's all our heritage. So there was another thing with the Chiho that the Chiho name is associated with, and it's the Chiho Massacre.
Yeah, and just recently there's a marker out on Mossydale Road out to the sort of northeast of Leesburg commemorating that was put up in the early 1900s. But again, back in, I believe, in the 1830s, the village, there was a group of U.S. soldiers that came in that had gotten rumors that this was a village that was causing attacks and causing problems, but when they got to the village, there were just mainly women and children there in the village, and so the soldiers attacked, and there was a court case, and the leader of the troops actually got court-martialed over that, and just a sort of a sad story in that whole time about how we dealt with the early inhabitants of our area. But that sort of all of those stories of conflict happen when different people start moving to areas where there's people, already living,
Sure.
and who owns the land.
Yeah, it's a terrible. It's part of our history.
Well,
Understand it so it doesn't repeat itself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's things that happen, and that's where, again, through the Thronatiska and what we do with the archives, we want to try to document those stories, because all of our stories, whether they're good or bad, are still stories we need to preserve.
Still part of our history.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, and the bad parts you want to remember so you don't repeat them, and the good parts you want to remember so that you do repeat them.
Yes.
Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So
At least it sounds good.
well, we talked about Thorntisca and Chiho. River Aquarium sounds very.
Like an Indian name?
It does.
Well, again, that came out. One of the things that, again, we talk about our water here, and that really came out of the redevelopment effort that started after the flood of 1994. Again, a catastrophic flood that nobody had seen here, anything like that, and really affected a large part of our community. So as redevelopment started, the idea came up to really begin making downtown be this centerpiece of redevelopment for our community. And the River Aquarium was just conceived as an anchor to all of that development, whether it's bringing in a hotel, bringing in additional retail business, or anything else that would come out, and becoming a tourist destination, because zoos and aquariums really are the highest attended museum type in the country. More people go to zoos and aquariums than all other museums combined. So they saw that as that anchor for that.
So is it unique that we have such number one, is it unique that our city our size has a zoo? Is it unique that we have such a large and booming or productive zoo?
No, absolutely. If you think about in Georgia, really Atlanta is the only other town that has anything like we. I mean, Columbus has some things along the river, but they don't have a zoo and they don't have an aquarium in Columbus. Many towns have museums, but to have a civil rights museum, an art museum, a history museum, a science museum, an aquarium, a zoo, a symphony, chorale, theater, everything that we have to offer for a town our size, we are very fortunate. And our town really has supported these efforts throughout the years, and it really improves our quality of life. And I think it aids us in economic development and being able to attract industries here. And it's one of the factors I think has brought in industries over the years, because if you bring people here, they need something to do.
Agreed. I don't know. I love the River Aquarium just because it's Southwest Georgia based. I think a lot of the exhibits in there. Now I knew there are exhibits from other places and whatnot, but the majority of the River Aquarium is Southwest Georgia. Mm-hmm. I'm one of those people who lived in Southwest Georgia for, I don't know, I think I was almost here 10 years. I never even had gone down the Flint. And my fishing upon the Flint made me appreciate the River Aquarium that much more. And it all goes back to the fact that it's a great little synopsis of what we have. I think that you can walk through there and see a multitude of different areas that are, I guess, river basin or river, I don't know, aquifer and things like that. I don't know. It's impressive to me, and it's been impressive to me since I don't know. My kids were young, and I started floating the Flint. Enjoyed it, but every time I go back, I find something kind of new in there.
Well, we hope that, and even at that, even if you're out on the river a lot, there's still things that you can't see because you don't have that perspective of being underwater all the time, or what's down in there in some of the deeper aquifers where some of the blind cavefish or blind salamanders live, or there's just things you won't normally see, and we're able to bring you up close to that.
Sure.
And certainly our focus is on the Flint and Southwest Georgia, and we do expand that because, again, where does the Flint go? It winds up in the Gulf of Mexico. So we impact, and there's been a lot of discussions in the state, in the tri-state water wars and the whole Apalachicola, Chattahoochee, Flint river system, and who gets to use the water and where does the water go. The fact, that our clean water needs to get to the Gulf so that we can bring oysters back from the Gulf up here.
Yeah.
We like our oyster bars.
Yeah.
They go good with beer.
AJ's
They make
specifically Skywater.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
or
And
a
Sholey.
or
Yeah.
a Sholey.
They're
But
very salty. They make
AJ's has the coldest sky water in town.
And they've got
Really?
some.
Yeah,
they've
they
got
do.
some good oysters.
They got some good oysters too.
Yep.
Yeah,
As
So
does
does
everybody
Austin's.
else who serves our beer.
and
so don't get mad.
and the catch too.
Yeah, the catch. Yeah.
Anyone that serves oysters
Anyone-
and our beer, it's
Anybody
like
that serves
tops in my
food.
book. Yeah.
And our beer.
So one of
Exactly.
the urban legends that I've been told my whole life is that I-75 was supposed to go through Albany. Any historical truth to that?
I've heard the same thing. Again, here in talking to a lot of our community leaders over the years, I've heard those stories. With everything that I have looked through in our archives, and I actively look trying to find it, I have yet to find anything.
Well, the whole thing's riddled with decapitations
Yep.
and
So
And headless horses.
yes,
Why would you come here with a headless horse?
Exactly.
So Albany was it was supposed to be a commerce center. It's always supposed to be a commerce center. It is. When I was a kid, it was supposed to be. We that's what we did. And if you needed something, you went to Albany.
no, it was. I mean, there were other towns established around us. Palmyra was one of those just to our northwest, just not too far, just a few miles from where we're, from downtown. But it was a very thriving town. It had doctors. It had
Palmyra was
schools.
actually a city.
It was, yeah. Had doctors, schools, a lot of things going on. But what they did not have was a direct connection to the steamboats that were coming to Albany on the Flint River. So they had to cart all their goods from out there downtown, and which carting goods, 3 or 4 miles
Yeah.
back at that time was not what we think of today.
That's a ways.
So this is where steamships could reliably get to. And so that sort of really was that piece. It was not people escaping persecution or exploring a new frontier. This place was already sort of known for its natural resources and longleaf pine trees and fertile lands and really undeveloped areas.
Does that not amaze anybody else at the table? The steamships. I always picture a steamship with I don't know. They're kind of big,
Yeah.
and they get up the Flint,
Yeah.
and like sometimes I have trouble getting down the Flint.
I see it almost
kayak.
I see it almost as impossible.
Well, again, the
Yeah.
steamships were shallow draft ships. They drafted in about 2 feet of water. They were about 40 to 50 feet long, about 20 feet wide. Most were stern wheel steamships, and they would push 2 or 3 cotton barges in addition to them up and down the Flint.
That was amazing.
The Corps of Engineers actually did keep the river dredged and rocks removed out of the main channels, and primarily steamships came up during the winter months when the water levels and
Water
rains were
levels
up
are high,
and could do.
yeah.
But then you had to sort of balance that with the floods and not because there were many ships that wrecked along there and hitting rocks or running into the bank.
I've seen kayaks wreck.
Yeah. Well, if you have been down there, one of the things if you look at, you'll notice in several parts of the Flint, you'll see these rocks piled up in certain areas along the river. That's part of the dredging, but also they pile the rocks up to create weirs to change the current so that the ships could turn in these sharp turns.
Now
along
that's
there.
so interesting. So is that I was talking about other urban myths. I was told those were Indian fish traps, but they're not Indian fish
No.
traps.
No, I don't believe so. Those were
That's
built
so cool.
long after. Now there are still some up in the smaller creeks, up the Muckalee Creek, particularly, and up to Kitchfinney. You can still find some of those areas. But we had dredges coming up and down the Flint River that would also move the logs out of the river as well as the rocks, because again, any obstruction
Yeah.
costs money.
That
So they
makes
had to get 'em
much
out.
more sense.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
those were much newer construction than that.
That's so interesting. So we had a lot of military bases here. Military has been a part of our history for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just from the earliest days toward the middle to end of World War II, we were a training ground here in Albany and Americus for Royal Air Force pilots to train here. There are actually some buried in the cemetery here out at Crown Hill, and there's markers around town commemorating the ones that lost their life here during training. And as it continued on and the base developed, Turner Field developed, and on into the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Nike missile bases were built here.
And what does that mean? What's a Nike missile base?
They were intercontinental missiles that were launch pads here in Albany. So during that Cuban Missile Crisis, I mean, Albany was a point on the map.
We were a target.
That if missiles launched from Cuba, they were going to come here.
Yeah. And so who was looking out for those ships as we on what is it, 4th and 5th and Slappy?
Yeah.
So who was on 5th and Slappy looking out for making sure we're all safe?
There's actually a little park just off of Slappy on 5th Avenue there that is opened up. And back in the 50s, again, to encourage the community to get involved into the effort to protect our country, they solicited a lot of Boy Scouts to man these watchtowers. So our existence as a society was put in the hands of a 12-year-old with a pair of binoculars to watch for bombers coming at 40,000 feet.
That's awesome.
So
he had binoculars and a knife.
And
he actually had his Boy
Swiss
Scout
Army
pocket.
knife.
He had his Boy Scout.
So you know,
a switchblade.
and we talk about our youth today. I mean,
Not allowed to have a switchblade.
Yeah, we got 5 military bases here, but we decided to ask the Boy Scouts to man the military.
They look up in the sky for
They're prepared.
anything out of the ordinary.
They're
But
prepared.
there's actually some newspaper articles referring to that and referring to this program that we found. And then they also, any businesses that had night watchmen, they had a procedure for them to call in case they saw the bombers coming.
Yeah.
Is there a planetarium exhibit about that?
Yeah, we need to.
We need to. Yeah,
Nice.
that's pretty neat. That's pretty cool. So since about 18 years after you graduated high school, you've pretty much dedicated yourself to supporting downtown in Albany. That's pretty cool. Tell us, is there what about that? Is it's been fulfilling as far as your career goes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Secondary career, I guess.
Yeah, no, I've been very fortunate and have had a lot of mentoring advice from a lot of good people in our community, and have had the chance to listen to a lot of people's stories, and just really started out as a desire to give back to my community and make sure that my kids and grandkids had a community that they could be proud of.
Right.
And just really have worked on that. And like I said, the position, I've been very fortunate to get the positions I have and really represent some really good organizations and carry that message, not just to our own community, but outside of our community as well.
Right. And I guess that's what we all, as parents especially, that's what we want. So like make a place where our kids individually would want to come back, and they could support their families, and they could grow. Then they could have their kids grow up here and support them. So it's definitely an honorable thing.
That way your grandkids aren't too far away.
That's right.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got one.
And we can take them to the River Aquarium.
Yeah,
That's
we
right.
can.
And
Yeah, we
Chiho.
Yeah, we got one.
Dorntisco.
Absolutely. Do those things, and that's
When they turn 21, we can take them to the brewery.
Yeah, there you go. But no, I think that is important. I mean, we have a good quality of life here, I think, and it's a good community to raise your kids in. Cost of living's relatively cheap, and it's just a good place to be. I've traveled around and been some other places, but I can't think of any place else I really would rather live than here.
No, I agree. Somehow or another, I as I was in high school, I intended to leave, and then I got drawn back in, and I wouldn't live anywhere else. So it's one of those things where
We
where
should
it's
investigate
home.
that.
We should.
I'm just going to go on a limb and say you couldn't, shoot stuff and, fish for stuff.
Other So
Other places don't have that many seasons for it.
that's true. Or have as long a season.
Yeah, it's a very long season.
Yeah.
It's one season.
Well, I certainly encourage folks, and I have my kids to sort of go off and explore, and certainly if there's opportunities, I think you certainly appreciate home more after you leave here, and really come back and get anchored here. And I think it's just part of all of us giving back to our community and having pride in our community. It's easy to say it's somebody else's job or responsibility to do it, and I don't care whether it's maintaining your own place or picking up trash along the street or just do anything you can. And people that say there's nothing to do in Albany are just people that are not engaged. I mean, there's plenty to do between school, church, sports, community activities. You can do something every single day and night here.
Well, if it's the opera and professional baseball, then they're right. But I mean, you can go outside and do something almost every day of the year if it's not raining. It has been raining a lot lately.
Well, if you want to see professional baseball, you can be in Atlanta in 3 hours.
You can be in Atlanta in 3 hours.
So,
yes. Yeah, very true.
If you want to see Harper play, you gotta go to Philly.
You gotta go to Philly. Yeah, and you got to pay a big ticket price because
probably. I think ticket prices are gonna go up.
The tickets are about to go up. Mr. Tommy Gregors, thank you very much for being on the No Dams Given podcast, and we appreciate everything you've done for downtown.
Well, thank y'all and for bringing the brewery downtown. Again, it's just another attraction, and it's something else. It's the 50,000 people that came to the aquarium last year. It's something else to hold them here just a little bit longer.
Yes, sir. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you guys. Yep.